So you find out you've got a mental illness. There's a couple of good things and a couple of bad things about this. One is that you know what is wrong with you. You finally have an understanding that there is a name for what you've got. That's one of the positives. The negatives, though, is you're staring at a mountain right from the bottom, and you don't know if you're going to be able to climb that hill. What happens after you have a diagnosis for mental illness? We'll discuss that today on Shattered the Podcast. Okay, so this one's going to be a bit tough because I'm going to have to delve into some deep emotion here. As I said, there was a couple of good things about finding out that you have a diagnosis. The most obvious being that you now know that you're not faking. You know that there is actually something seriously wrong with you. But then there's the negative. I imagine it would be like sitting at the base of the mountains, looking up a hill, an impossible climb, and you don't have the equipment, the skills, or the ability to get to the top, but you know that you have to. And for me, and for many others, I suspect, finding out that you have a diagnosis is a shock. But then there's the big questions of where do you go from here? And you're fighting the stigmas of your own imagination, your own understanding of mental illness. You may have only ever seen it portrayed in films. You might have only heard about it portrayed on the news. Guy with mental illness went Burko and did something. So there's a amount of figuring out or deciding that you can get better, which is an ongoing thing, keeps going, it never stops. And you've got to start thinking about treatment. And we're going to go into psychs and that sort of thing next week. But when you first find out that you've got a mental illness, those symptoms are magnified in such a way that you just want to stop them. And you haven't started medication yet. Maybe you have. Maybe your GP has put you on a calmative or something like that, some mood balancer. But essentially, you are looking at this massive mountain, totally unprepared for the climb. You don't know how you're going to get to the top. You don't know if you're going to get to the top. When I was in high school, I was a mountain climber. I went down to Mount Arapiles in Victoria and spent 2 weeks just climbing incredible peaks. And the thing of it is that we were fully prepared. We knew what we were going in for. We had all the equipment. We had all the ropes. Everything was in great condition. And we knew that we were going to be able to get to the top of whatever peak we wanted to climb. Some were harder than others. Some, at the time, I felt like I couldn't climb. But I knew at the end of the day I was going to reach the top and I was going to make it. But standing at the bottom of those cliffs looking up, particularly me with a crippling fear of heights, it was always scary. It was always, we could fall. But it's nothing compared to the fear of looking at your own mental illness and thinking, how do I get through this to get back to a place where I can be normal, for want of a better word? There's a couple of decisions that I made at the time that I didn't even realize I was making. I had to decide that I wanted to get better, because my mind was screaming at me that I was useless, I was hopeless, I was, less than. And I had to decide that those voices weren't the most important thing. See, the problem with getting treatment for mental illness is you have to talk about the event. Think about the worst nightmare you've ever had. Me, like my grandmother, I don't remember my dreams. I purposefully work hard and consistently to the point where I'm 50 years old and I never remember a dream. I've just taught my mind not to because my dreams were always so scary. Now, my grandmother, a beautiful, beautiful Christian lady, had the same thing. She just mentioned it casually one day. I don't remember my dreams. They're always too horrible. I don't know what it was in my DNA that makes those dreams so bad. But I knew that thinking about them, dwelling on them, was only going to hurt me in the long run. So now I'm in a situation where I have to think about one of the worst days of my life over and over and over again. And when it was a workplace injury, you felt like you had to prove to people that you were actually sick. I did one test for these people that were disputing my claim. And there was 5 questions in each box, and there was about 200 questions. Without exaggeration, there was like 200 questions. It was ridiculous. For somebody in the midst of PTSD, can't concentrate, can't focus, you've got to sit down and you've got to think about each and every question. Now, the questions were broken down into blocks of about 5. Pretty sure it was 5. And the questions were basically... first question was like symptoms. Second question was like, I don't know, different aspects of mental illness. I wish I could remember. Well, actually, I don't. This is one questionnaire I'm glad that I don't remember that much about. But the 5th and last question in each of these blocks was about alcohol abuse. Now, I don't and never have drunk alcohol. I have been drunk twice, but I had to work really hard to do that. And quite without exaggeration, the days that I got drunk are the only days that I've ever tasted alcohol. I hated every second of it. I had to drink a little bit of alcohol. I had to drink a lot of Coke. It was the only way I could drink it. It was so horrible to me. So even once I got my diagnosis and I was desperate for distraction, alcohol and drugs were not an option for me. I didn't know how to get drugs, and alcohol, I can't stand the taste. I'm already in pain. Why am I then going to inflict myself more pain by drinking this horrible stuff that to me tastes and smells like petrol? So in this questionnaire, every 5th question of 200 was about alcohol abuse. Now, on all of these questionnaires, you've got an answer between 1 and 5. And what they do is they add up those numbers at the end and decide by that number how mentally ill you are, which is ridiculous. But it's excessively good for somebody that is trying to not pay you workers' compensation, because if you don't reach the right number, you don't get workers' compensation. On this test, I scored high on everything, on all the 4 questions before drug and alcohol, but then drug and alcohol was 0. Every single time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How much does this affect you? 1 being the highest, 5 being the least. 5 being the most, 1 being the least. What number do you put it at? I put it at number 1. I could go through each and every question. How often you drink alcohol? Do you drink alcohol to excess? Do you find that you have dreams of wanting to drink alcohol or illicit drugs? Do you And it was like this. And of course, I put 0 on them. So this guy turned around to me and had the audacity to say, you don't have PTSD. In fact, I don't find that you have any significant mental illness. You have maybe a borderline personality disorder. Maybe. Being told that you're not sick in this kind of circumstance was crushing. Absolutely crushing. Thankfully, I went back to my GP and my own psychologist and psychiatrist, and they all spat the dummy. They went off. They were outraged at this and blatantly said to me, this is workers' compensation, trying to not give you workers' comp. At the beginning and all throughout my journey, I've had to decide whether it's worth continuing. Is it worth fighting? Is it worth trying to get better? Because you don't know how hard it is. Even though you think you understand this is going to be tough, you have no idea. I've told my story in small rooms so many times that I'm sick of the story. I don't even know if it has taken away the effect of the story. It never has. But at times I've just felt so sick of the story. Somebody saying, I want you to talk about it again. It's like, really? I have to talk about it again? I have to relive this nightmare? I have to tell you how I feel about it? Because you can't just recite it as facts. It's not a situation that's built around facts. It's built around the emotions of what you were going through. Now that, of course, is talking about an incident. But it's the same with any mental illness. When you are fighting this constant pressure to be normal and to not have a mental illness, and you feel that pressure constantly, you feel like everybody's looking at you and going, oh, you're so broken, why don't you just shake it off? Because although you can't, it's still a human biological mental reaction to say, maybe I can shake this off. Next time. I want to try and finish with a message of hope. Hope for me, as always, you know this, comes from understanding that you have to work hard, that you have to work constantly, and that you have to be willing to do the work every day. You're almost like a shark when you've got a mental illness. Shark can never stop moving. It's got to constantly move to breathe. If it stops moving, it's dead. It's like that with mental illness. If you stop trying to get better, it will kill you. It will destroy your life. It will break you. You have to decide that you want and will, if not get better in that kind of vernacular, but to live better. To live better than you are now. To not react the way that you are now. Next time, I'm going to talk about the what next aspect of Mental Illness 101. Psychologists and psychiatrists. What are they? Who are they? Is there a difference between them? As always, I invite you to subscribe, like, and share, not to make me popular, not to give me money, but to help us normalize the conversation around mental illness. Have a great week. I look forward to speaking to you next time. Subscribe, like, and share. Thank you for listening to Shattered, the podcast. I'd like to thank our producer, Meredith Brosnan, our executive producer, Torian Lau, and the band Adelaide for allowing us to use their song as our theme. Go to shatteredthepodcast.com for more information.